Hi, Erin here. When I was a little kid, I got lost in the store, and unlike most little kids, I didn't actually enjoy the adventure. I don't remember the getting lost or any of that, but I do remember the results, and the result was that I clung to the shopping cart for the next few weeks or months even, when I would have to go shopping with my mom for groceries. The writing life is a little bit like that, especially when you first start writing. It's very, very scary. And it would be nice if there were a shopping cart that you could cling to, or maybe somebody's hand, but you're pretty much on your own when you get lost in writing. And to me, the perfect way to think about it is getting lost in the woods. Um, Actually, Fanny Howe, she's a poet and a novelist and an essayist and all this kind of stuff. She disagrees with using the woods because she thinks it doesn't quite do the feeling justice of what it's like to be a writer. But I think the image will work, so I'm going to use it because I think it'll be fun. And so when you're a writer, it's like getting lost in the woods. And sometimes you don't even know you've entered the woods until a couple months later because somebody said, hey, you're a good writer, you should write more, you should do this, or maybe you should apply to grad school. Surprise! And so you end up in the writing woods and didn't even know you were in them. Other people know full well that they're entering the writing woods, but they're still just as lost as the person who is surprised to find themselves in the woods. The thing is that that's actually a really, really good place to be. You need to be lost when you're writing. You shouldn't have all the answers. You should maybe have a few answers, which you can build on, but you don't need to have the answer, and I don't know that there is one when you're writing. The thing is that, actually this is from Fanny Howe's essay, she says you are progressing at one level and becoming more lost at another. I think that's exactly the way to describe the writing life. As you begin to understand more things, you become more lost with something else. I had this experience when I first started writing, the first 2 years, completely lost. I did not know what I was doing. I didn't know why I'd been accepted into grad school. I didn't even know why I really applied, except that my mentor and professor said, you should apply to grad school. So I decided to do that. So I ended up in the writing woods, seemingly by accident. It wasn't an accident, of course, but I was surprised to find myself in the writing woods. And I spent the next 2 years basically trying to play catch up with the people who had been pursuing the writing life, since they knew they were going to go to grad school when they were in undergrad or whatever. They knew they were going to do that. And they had, I guess, they were further ahead than I was. Not that they weren't more lost or less lost than I was, but they just had a more well-rounded perspective, I guess. So my first year in grad school, I spent a lot of that time feeling confused and lost and trying to understand things. And it was during my second year that I kind of started to figure out what I was doing, but I was still lost because I was still figuring out how to write, which is something I still do to this day. I'm still figuring out how to write. When I sit down to write a blog post or a poem, I'm still figuring out what it is I want to say or how I'm going to circle around a subject. And that ties back into Fanny Howe's essay about how you can look at a particular problem or a particular thing from multiple perspectives. And that's something that I really like to do with my poetry and even with my blog. I like to look at an issue or something and think about it and approach it in a certain way. And once I've approached it that way, I then have to revisit all my other ideas and see how my new version informs or interacts with those other ideas. And so in one sense, I have progressed, and in another, I have become more lost because I haven't arrived at a resolution or anything like that, and that's really not the purpose of my writing. It never has been, I guess. I'm more about just, I guess, studying a thing, which comes into play with my attention to objects or images, because those things take on value in and of themselves. They become important for one reason or another, and they may have a certain significance to myself, but once those things are released into the wild and people read them, They get to interpret those objects and to decide, well, I think Erin was writing about this when she wrote this, and maybe they're right and maybe they're not. That's the fun part about reading somebody else's work after the fact. You get to interpret it. Another part of being in the woods is that, and it's a really nice thing, is that you're not alone. There are other people in the woods with you, and you may run into them. You probably will. And I hope you'll have some people there to give you guidance, kind of like I had with my mentor in undergrad and then my mentor in grad school. They both provided some direction when I had absolutely no direction and felt absolutely no confidence in my writing abilities or my abilities as a poet. That's something I still struggle with. Unfortunately, I have people who say, you know what, Erin, you're a good writer, keep going, keep doing what you're doing. And so that's one of the reasons, I guess, that I like to encourage other people who are in the writing woods. And another thing is that some of those people in the woods are going to be your peers, and they can help you understand things, and sometimes they're not going to be the right people to journey with you in the woods. They're going to be critical, they're going to be judgmental, they're going to they're going to be jealous of you and maybe what you're doing, and decide to do whatever they can to discourage you and to make you try to leave the woods, which, by the way, is impossible. You can stop writing, and in that kind of sense, you've left the woods. But once you've been in the woods, the effects are permanent. It's just the way it is. And then you might just have some occasional visitors to you. They don't actually live in the woods with you, but people outside of the writing sphere should be reading your poetry or your novels or whatever it is that you write. And I think those people, I don't know if they're more important than your peers, but you might get a more honest reaction from them. They're not going to be the people who are all creative and saying, oh, well, I perfectly understand what you were trying to do with that. They're going to be the people who say, you know, I was really, really confused with this syntax, and I didn't know what you were doing, and I don't know, I was just really, really confused. And sometimes that criticism is valid, and it's important to listen to that. So that's another element of the writing woods, thinking about the people who are going to populate the woods and who you might run into, and maybe the people you want to avoid. So I hope you enjoy being in the writing woods if you are in them. If you're not, if you're just kind of on the outskirts, kind of peering in, why don't you just enter? Come join the rest of us who are lost. We promise it's fun. We'll be lost together, and we'll talk about things and figure things out as we go. So here's to being lost, or being bewildered, as Fanny Howe would say, more often.